What would you do if a little black girl looked you in the eyes and asked, "Can I eat your leftovers?" Not for attention, not as a joke, but with the quiet desperation of someone who hadn't eaten all day, maybe longer. That's exactly what happened in the middle of a high-end restaurant in downtown Atlanta. A little girl, no older than 8, approached a woman dining alone at a marble-top table. Designer purse, gold watch, untouched wine glass. Wealth radiated from her, the kind of wealth that usually comes with distance, silence, and a certain coldness to the world outside. But that question pierced everything. The little girl stood there, her eyes wide and body trembling. No shame, no hesitation, just hunger, and unfiltered. Everyone around froze. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations halted. Even the waiter, balancing a tray of crème brûlée, turned and stared. It was one of those moments where time bends, where your heart splits between discomfort and duty, where you realize something real is happening, something that can't be ignored. This wasn't just about a meal. It was about visibility, about poverty in plain sight, about race, class, and what it means to be human in a world that often forgets how to be humane. The millionaire woman had 2 choices: dismiss the girl like society often does, or truly stopped and see her. And what happened next would ripple far beyond the walls of that restaurant. Because this little girl didn't just ask for scraps. She asked to be seen, to be acknowledged, to matter. And in doing so, she changed everything. Before we dive into the story, I want to ask you something deeply important. Have you ever felt invisible? Like your voice didn't matter? Like the world was passing you by while you stood there hoping someone, anyone, would notice? If that question touches something inside you, this video is for you. So please like this video if this story already has you feeling something. Subscribe to the channel if you believe in stories that shine light on injustice, resilience, and transformation. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a moment where you had to ask for help, even when it hurt? Your voice matters here, and your engagement helps this message reach the people who need it most. Now, let's go back to that moment. Let's look into the eyes of that little girl, and the woman whose life would never be the same again. It was just another Saturday afternoon in the city, warm, buzzing with chatter, clinking glasses, and the steady hum of jazz playing softly from the restaurant speakers. The kind of place where napkins are cloth, waiters move like dancers, and people don't look each other in the eyes unless absolutely necessary. At table 7, a woman sat alone, mid-40s, elegant, composed. Her name was Danielle. She was known in the city for her real estate empire, philanthropy events, and designer wardrobe. Her presence in the room was quiet, but commanding. She had just finished her filet mignon, and the waiter had cleared most of her plate, but not all. There were a few untouched roasted potatoes, a sliver of steak, half of a buttered roll. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, can I eat your leftovers?" Every fork paused, every sip halted, every conversation fell into an eerie hush. The voice was small, feminine, shaking, a child's voice. Danielle looked up, slightly confused, and there she was, and a little black girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Her hair was tied in small, messy puffs. Her t-shirt hung off one shoulder, faded and worn. She wasn't begging. She wasn't whining. She was standing tall as she could, staring directly into Danielle's eyes with a kind of courage that only comes from desperation. People looked away, pretending not to notice. The manager peered nervously from the bar. One woman gasped softly, clutching her pearls, not in empathy, but in quiet disgust. Danielle didn't respond immediately. She blinked. Her mind ran wild with questions. Where are her parents? How did she get in here? Is this some kind of scam? But nothing about the girl felt staged. She wasn't selling candy. She didn't have a speech prepared. She had come for food, the literal scraps of someone else's luxury. And for a moment, something cracked. Danielle had built her life on precision and control. There were no surprises in her schedule, no mess in her world. But this girl? She was raw, unpredictable, real. The air around them thickened. Danielle noticed the girl's arms, thin, bruised in places, as if the world had pushed her around too many times. Her eyes, though, they weren't dull. They were burning with something fierce. Not entitlement, not manipulation. Hunger, but not just for food. For dignity, for recognition, for a single moment where someone saw her not as a problem, but as a person. Danielle's hand almost instinctively moved toward her plate, and in that second, before any word was spoken, the entire restaurant waited. What would she do? Would she shoo the girl away like others had likely done countless times? Would she call security? Would she pretend not to hear? Or would she do the unthinkable, engage, connect, and let the moment unfold? That single question, "Can I eat your leftovers?" was not just a request for food. It was a confrontation with everything Danielle thought she knew about kindness, poverty, and what it meant to live in the same city, yet in completely different worlds. And now, there was no going back. The seconds that followed felt like an eternity. No one moved, no one spoke. The weight of the question, so simple yet so searing, hung in the air like thick smoke. Danielle's fingers hovered over the plate, her breath caught in her throat. Around her, the murmurs of the restaurant faded into a cold, paralyzing silence. It wasn't just that a child had asked for food, it was that she had done it here, in a place where elegance was currency and struggle had no seat at the table. Eyes darted. Some stared openly, others pretended not to see. A couple across the room exchanged whispers. The manager inched closer, clearly unsure whether to intervene or stay back. One server, still holding a tray, stood frozen mid-step, watching with quiet tension. And the girl, she didn't move. She stood still. Her hands were at her sides. She didn't beg, she didn't fidget. Her eyes stayed locked on Danielle's face. Not aggressive, not pleading, just steady, as if to say, "I'm here, I exist, what will you do with that?" It was a silence loaded with judgment, not toward the girl, but toward the woman now holding a moment that was no longer private. Danielle was being watched, measured. Would she become the villain in someone's Instagram post? The next cold-hearted millionaire trending for the wrong reasons. But for Danielle, the noise wasn't external. It was internal. Something inside her cracked in that silence. A memory she had long buried came rushing back, of being 13, standing outside a corner store, watching other kids buy candy while she counted coins in her palm and realized she was still short. She remembered the burn of shame, the invisible weight of being hungry and pretending you weren't. Danielle hadn't always been rich, but she had worked hard to forget what it meant to be poor. And now here was this little girl, pulling that buried truth out from under the concrete walls Danielle had built around herself. Still, her instincts battled each other. One voice in her mind screamed, "This is not your responsibility." Another whispered, "This is your moment." She looked at the plate, then back at the girl. The silence deepened, not because no one was talking, but because so much was being said without words. The girl's eyes never left hers. It was as if time held its breath, waiting for Danielle to decide who she would be in this story. Another stranger who looked away, or something else entirely. Danielle could feel her heart pounding. Her palms began to sweat. It wasn't the girl that unsettled her. It was what the girl represented. All the people we walk past, all the needs we ignore, all the truths we dress up in silence. The world teaches us to look away, to keep moving, to protect our comfort at all costs. But that silence, it wasn't just uncomfortable. It was alive, demanding, transformative. In that breathless moment, a millionaire and a little black girl stood in the middle of a world divided by wealth, race, and circumstance, and the silence between them was louder than any words could ever be. Her name was Alana. She was 8 years old, though her small frame and quiet demeanor often made people think she was younger. She lived just 4 blocks from the restaurant, in a shelter that didn't always have enough food to go around. Her mother, Tamika, worked 2 night shifts cleaning office buildings and spent her days chasing whatever childcare she could find or afford, which most of the time meant none. Alana wasn't supposed to be alone that day, but things don't always go as planned when you're barely surviving. She had wandered out when the hunger became too much to ignore. She knew the city's layout better than any child should. She knew where the leftover bread might be behind certain bakeries, which bodegas didn't ask questions, which corners drew the least attention. But today, something inside her said no. No to digging through another trash bag. No to swallowing the ache in her stomach and pretending it didn't hurt. No to being invisible. She passed by the restaurant and looked through the glass, the kind of glass that separates worlds. She saw plates that looked like art, people laughing like they didn't have a single burden in the world. And then she saw Danielle, seated alone with a plate half full and a look on her face that wasn't mean or cold, just distracted. And something told her, ask. Alana had never done that before, never approached a stranger, never dared to step into a place so obviously not meant for her. But the hunger had grown teeth, and maybe more than hunger, it was the loneliness, the need to be seen, to exist, to matter, even for 1 second. At school, when she was able to attend, Alana rarely spoke. Her teachers described her as quiet but observant. She'd sit in the back, always watching, absorbing the room. She noticed which kids were always picked for group projects and which ones weren't. She noticed when someone was pretending to smile. She noticed when people pretended not to see her. And Alana remembered everything. She remembered when the electricity got cut off last winter and her mom cried in the dark, thinking she was asleep. She remembered when the other kids laughed at her for wearing the same socks for 3 days. She remembered the time she got a slice of pizza on her birthday from a church volunteer, and it tasted like love. Alana was not just a hungry child. She was a quiet storm, a little girl shaped by systems she didn't create, but had to navigate anyway. She carried herself with a dignity that confused people, like she knew something they didn't, and maybe she did. Maybe she knew that the world didn't change with big speeches or sweeping laws, but with small moments of courage, like standing in a restaurant and asking a stranger for leftovers. She didn't know Danielle was rich. She didn't care. She just saw a plate of food, a face that didn't seem cruel, and a moment where she could either stay silent or speak up. So she chose to speak. Because deep down, even children know that silence protects the system, and questions, even small ones, can shake its foundation. Danielle Mitchell wasn't born into money. She built her fortune one flipped house at a time, starting with a single property she bought at age 25. After years of working 3 jobs and sleeping on a friend's couch, she knew struggle, knew the taste of instant noodles for breakfast, lunch and dinner, knew what it felt like to have her card declined at a gas station and pretend she'd just pressed the wrong button. But over the years, that version of herself had faded, replaced by sharp suits, meetings with investors, charity galas, and a penthouse that touched the sky. She became Ms. Mitchell, respected, admired, envied, a woman who'd earned her place in the room. Still, somewhere along the way, something had hardened. Danielle had grown cautious. She stopped answering unknown numbers. She learned to scan a room quickly, detect agendas, filter out the noise. Her generosity became curated. A check for a foundation here, a scholarship fund there. Controlled giving, no mess, no risk. That day at the restaurant, she wasn't there for business or celebration. She was there to be alone, to breathe. She had just closed a major deal, a luxury housing project in an area once deemed undesirable, and while her colleagues toasted the profits, Danielle felt uneasy. She couldn't quite explain it. Maybe it was the way the families she used to know were slowly vanishing from the neighborhoods she now redeveloped. Maybe it was how the word revitalization always seemed to mean displacement for people who looked like her, or like she once did. But she buried those thoughts beneath ambition. That's how she had survived. And then came the girl, Alana. With one question, the child had ripped through Danielle's carefully curated world. Not rudely, not dramatically, just honestly, painfully honestly. Danielle looked at her and saw something hauntingly familiar. She saw herself, not the version that graced magazine covers or gave keynote speeches at women in business luncheons. The girl she used to be, the one who counted coins, the one who prayed the lights would stay on, the one who once stared at a stranger's plate and wondered what it would feel like to eat until she was full. Danielle didn't cry. She didn't gasp. But inside, something shifted. Her mind flashed to all the Danielle Mitchells of the world, black women who had climbed, who had survived, who had built entire empires from the ashes of their childhoods, and how easy it was, once at the top, to forget the hunger that fueled the climb. That wasn't who she wanted to be, not anymore. In that moment, Danielle realized something powerful. Her wealth wasn't just in dollars. It was in presence, in choice, in humanity. And here was a choice staring her in the face, one that couldn't be solved with a donation or a speech. This was personal. This was now. Alana's question had become Danielle's mirror. And as she looked at this little girl with fire in her eyes and hunger in her belly, Danielle knew this was not just a test of generosity. It was a test of memory, of connection, of soul. And she wasn't about to fail it. Danielle gently pushed the plate toward Alana. No dramatic gesture, no performative kindness, just quiet, intentional movement. But Alana didn't grab it. Not yet. She looked at Danielle again as if to confirm, "Is this real? Is this allowed?" And Danielle nodded. That nod, so small, so human, did something words couldn't. It dissolved the invisible wall that had always stood between people like them, the millionaire and the child, the comfortable and the forgotten, the fed and the hungry. Alana took the food. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. It was something else, the overwhelming intensity of receiving something she had asked for, when so many times the answer had been no, not now, or worse, silence. She sat on the edge of the chair, barely touching it, as if she might be kicked out at any moment. She ate slowly, with the restraint of someone who had learned to make every bite count. Her eyes flicked around the room, not to admire the decor, but to watch for the moment when someone would demand she leave. But no one did. Danielle said nothing at first. She just watched. And in that silence, something sacred unfolded. Because what Alana had asked for wasn't just food. It was space. It was safety. It was acknowledgement. She wasn't starving for calories alone. She was starving to be seen, to be heard, to be more than a statistic or a shadow. Danielle felt it in her bones. This little girl's hunger carried generations. It wasn't just hers. It was her mother's exhaustion, her grandmother's resilience, her ancestors' survival stitched into every step she took through a world that didn't make room for her. And yet here she was, asking, sitting, existing. Danielle leaned forward. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Alana. How old are you?" 8. Danielle swallowed, her throat tight. "Where's your mom?" "Working," Alana said. "She said I'd be okay." Those 4 words pierced Danielle's chest. She said I'd be okay. How many times had black mothers told their daughters that same phrase, knowing it wasn't entirely true, just necessary, a wish disguised as assurance, a shield made of words? Danielle saw it all, not just the girl but the system, the way poverty disguised itself as normalcy, the way resilience became expectation, the way asking for help had become a radical act of defiance. This wasn't charity. This wasn't Danielle giving back. This was Danielle remembering that being successful didn't mean she'd escaped. It meant she had the power to turn around and open a door, set a table, make space for someone who wasn't supposed to be there, and insist that they belonged. Alana kept eating. Danielle ordered her another plate, this time hot, fresh, full, and something in Alana shifted. Her shoulders relaxed. Her eyes stopped scanning the room. She was safe. Not because the world had changed, but because in this moment, someone saw her as worthy of more than scraps, more than charity, more than pity. She was treated as human, and sometimes that alone is revolutionary. Danielle leaned back in her chair, watching as Alana took the final bite from her second plate. The girl didn't smile. She didn't say much, but there was a stillness in her now, a rare peace that children like her rarely get to feel in a world so quick to rush them, judge them, erase them. Danielle could have left it at that, paid the bill, offered a kind smile, and returned to her life, and no one would have blamed her. She had done enough, more than most, but something deeper stirred inside her, a quiet voice, not guilt, not charity, but clarity. Danielle had spent years building walls, protecting her energy, keeping a safe distance from anything that reminded her of the past. She fought so hard to leave behind, but here was this child, not asking for money or praise, just a meal, and in doing so, she had torn down every emotional defense Danielle had ever constructed. This wasn't about saving a child, it was about remembering who she used to be, and realizing, maybe for the first time in years, that she had the power to change not just moments, but trajectories. Danielle stood up. "Alana," she said gently, "do you know where your mother works?" The girl nodded, unsure where the question was going. "Would you feel safe showing me?" Alana hesitated. Not because she was scared, but because she wasn't used to adults asking her opinion about anything. She finally whispered, "Yes." Danielle paid the bill, left a tip big enough to earn nervous gratitude from the staff, and walked out with Alana by her side, not holding her hand, not trying to parent her, but walking with her, as equals. As if they were 2 people simply heading somewhere important, and they were. Tamika was at the back of a cleaning crew inside a corporate tower nearby, scrubbing floors under fluorescent lights that didn't care who she was. When Danielle and Alana arrived, the mother froze. Her body stiffened with panic, afraid her daughter was in trouble or worse, that someone rich and powerful had come to complain. But then she saw Alana's face, full, calm, soft, and then she saw Danielle, not with judgment or suspicion, but with something else, recognition. As if somewhere deep inside, Tamika sensed that this wasn't just a moment, it was a shift. Danielle introduced herself, gently, respectfully. She asked Tamika if they could talk. They sat on a crate in the back hallway, the smell of bleach lingering in the air. And Danielle didn't offer a check. She didn't promise miracles. She asked questions. "What are your hours like? What's Alana's school situation? What do you need most right now? Tamika was stunned. No one had ever asked her that and truly meant it. By the end of that conversation, Danielle had done something radical in its simplicity. She listened, fully, without pity, without rushing. And then, only then, did she act. She offered to help enroll Alana in an after-school program near her condo. She connected Tamika with a job placement friend who specialized in stable daytime work for single mothers. She didn't fix everything, but she opened doors Tamika didn't even know existed, and none of this came from guilt. It came from seeing. Danielle had always thought power was about control, but that day she learned that real power is presence, showing up, staying, choosing not to look away. And the answer she gave, not just the food, not just the ride, not even the resources, was a declaration. I see you, and I refuse to pretend you're not there. The following week, Danielle invited Alana and Tamika to her home, not a charity event, not a publicized gesture, just a quiet dinner at her long oak dining table, the same table where contracts had been signed, deals celebrated, and decisions made that shaped entire neighborhoods. But that night, it wasn't a boardroom. It was something far more powerful. It was a table of equals. Tamika hesitated at first. She'd never been inside a penthouse. Her hands fidgeted with her sleeve, her eyes scanning the space like it might collapse under her presence. Alana stood quietly, her expression cautious but curious, holding onto her mother's side. Danielle didn't rush them. She simply opened the door, barefoot, no makeup, wearing a soft sweater and jeans. Not the woman from the articles, but the woman from that restaurant moment. The woman who had been changed. The table was already set, not by a housekeeper, by Danielle herself. 3 plates, no silver domes, no intimidation, just warmth, fresh cornbread, baked chicken, steamed greens, and laughter. Soft at first, but growing as Alana began to ask about Danielle's view, her bookshelves, the photo of her as a young girl in front of a rundown apartment. You looked like me, Alana said, pointing. Danielle smiled, her eyes misting. I was you. And that's when the room shifted, because the table was no longer about food. It was about belonging, about rewriting the rules of who gets to sit where and why. For so long, women like Tamika had been forced to clean around tables like this, and girls like Alana were told to be quiet near them. But now they were guests, not because of luck or pity, but because someone had chosen to break the unspoken rule that power stays on one side of the table. Danielle listened as Tamika talked about working through pregnancies, about buses that never arrived, about the exhaustion that doesn't go away just because the bills are paid on time. She spoke not as someone looking for rescue, but as a woman who had survived everything that was meant to break her. And Danielle, for once, didn't try to offer solutions. She just sat in it. The weight, the beauty, the rage, the resilience. Midway through dessert, Alana looked up and said, "This is the best meal I've ever had." Danielle didn't say thank you. She didn't get emotional. She just said, "You deserve it." And in that moment, the power shifted. Because Danielle realized that generosity wasn't about giving from the top down. It was about dismantling the very idea of the top. It was about inviting people to the table and then listening when they spoke. That night, as they said their goodbyes, Tamika hugged Danielle, not awkwardly, not out of obligation, but with real, soul-deep gratitude, not just for the food or the opportunity, but for something far more rare, dignity. Danielle closed the door, sat at the now empty table, and realized something that would never leave her. The table hadn't just fed Alana. It had healed something inside herself. Because when you make room for others, sometimes the person you rescue is you. Danielle hadn't planned on anyone seeing what happened that day in the restaurant. She wasn't looking for attention. In fact, she would have preferred it stayed private, something sacred between her and the girl who'd shattered her world in the most beautiful way. But the world had other plans. Unbeknownst to her, a man at a nearby table had captured the entire interaction on his phone. Not the full conversation, but the moment, the question, the silence, the handing over of the plate, the girl's trembling hands, the stillness that followed. He uploaded it with a simple caption. A little girl just asked a millionaire for her leftovers. What happened next made me cry. Within hours, the clip had tens of thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. By morning it was everywhere. News outlets picked it up. Commentators debated it. Social justice pages praised it. Some called Danielle a hero. Others questioned why this had to happen in the first place, but no one, not a single person, could deny the emotional punch of that moment. The video didn't show names. No faces were clearly visible. But the story behind it lit a fire. People started asking questions. Why is a child hungry in a city full of wealth? Why are there so many Alanas walking past restaurants every day unseen? What does it say about us that this moment feels like a miracle instead of the norm? Danielle remained silent at first. She didn't need the spotlight, but when a journalist finally tracked her down, she agreed to speak, not to take credit, but to tell the truth. She went on camera and said, "I'm not the story that little girl is, and the fact that we're all shocked by her question means we haven't been paying attention." That quote went viral on its own. Soon, advocacy groups were reaching out. Community organizers wanted to collaborate. Food insecurity programs saw spikes in donations. A group of high school students launched a campaign called No More Scraps, demanding better access to school meals and after-school food programs. Alana's identity was eventually revealed, with her mother's permission, and their story became a symbol, not of charity, not of poverty porn, but of what happens when someone dares to ask and someone else dares to answer differently. Tamika was offered job interviews. Alana was invited to speak at youth events. One organization even turned her, quote, "Can I eat your leftovers?" into a mural in downtown Atlanta, surrounded by images of young black girls with crowns and fire in their eyes. But it wasn't just the external change that mattered. Danielle changed too. She began mentoring young women in her community, not from a stage, but from her kitchen, from her office, from coffee shops and school parking lots and the real spaces where lives are shaped. She created a foundation, quietly, focused on single mothers navigating poverty, not just with money, but with community and practical support. The moment had gone public, but the transformation? That stayed deeply personal. And for millions of people watching from screens across the country, that 30-second clip became more than a story. It became a mirror. And once you've seen yourself in that mirror, whether as the girl, the woman, or the silent bystander, you can't unsee it. Alana never asked for any of it. The attention, the cameras, the articles calling her brave and resilient or inspirational. She just wanted to eat. But once the world saw her, really saw her, something extraordinary happened. She became a symbol, not of poverty, not of pity, but of power. In the weeks that followed, her story spread far beyond Atlanta. Schools used it as a conversation starter about food insecurity. Churches referenced her courage in sermons. Activists cited her name in speeches about systemic neglect and invisible suffering. And yet, through it all, Alana remained a child. She still liked to draw, still collected stickers, still worried about tests at school and whether her mum would make it home on time. But something inside her had shifted. She had felt the impact of being heard. And once a child understands that her voice carries weight, the world can no longer ignore her. At a community forum one night, someone handed Alana the mic. She looked nervous, but she spoke anyway. "I didn't mean to be famous," she said. "I just didn't want to be hungry anymore." Simple, honest, devastating. Her words echoed through the room and through the hearts of everyone listening. Danielle sat beside her, not as a spokesperson, not as a gatekeeper, but as a witness. She had learned quickly that Alana didn't need saving. She needed room. And now, Danielle's role was clear. Protect that space, amplify her voice, and step back when it was time to let her lead. Organizations began to reach out, not just to help Alana, but to involve her in shaping youth programs. One school district launched an initiative inspired by her story, making it policy that no child would ever be denied a warm meal, regardless of payment. Tamika, too, found her footing. With a new job, regular hours, and a community that suddenly saw her value, she began to thrive. Her posture changed. Her laugh returned. And more than anything, she felt pride, not just in surviving, but in raising a daughter who had unknowingly started a movement. But as the spotlight grew, so did the questions. Was it fair to place so much symbolic weight on a child? Would the world still care when her story wasn't trending? Danielle wrestled with those questions too, because she understood something many people didn't. When society finds a feel-good story, it often forgets that real change isn't made in headlines. It's made in silence, in the daily work, in showing up long after the camera crews have left. So she made a vow, not to turn Alana into a mascot for pain, but to ensure she had what every child deserves, a future defined by choice, not circumstance, and that future was already forming. Alana began writing stories, fiction mostly, but always about girls who ask bold questions in rooms where they're not supposed to speak, girls who push back, girls who walk into silence and demand to be acknowledged. One of her stories ended like this. The girl didn't want the queen's crown. She just wanted to sit at the table and be full, and in the end, that was enough to change the kingdom. Alana was no longer the girl who asked for leftovers. She was the girl who reminded the world what it means to feed a soul. Imagine this. You're seated in a restaurant, scrolling through your phone, waiting for your food to arrive. The world outside is moving fast. Deadlines, bills, plans, stress. Everything feels just out of reach. And then suddenly, a child walks up to your table, not selling anything, not smiling for pity, just looking at you with steady eyes and asking, "Can I eat your leftovers?" What do? Do you look around for someone else to handle it? Do you offer a few dollars and send her on her way? Do you pretend not to hear? Or do you pause, really pause, and ask yourself, why is this even happening? Because the truth is, these moments are not rare. What's rare is when someone chooses to see them. This story isn't about Danielle's wealth. It's not even about Alana's hunger. It's about the spaces between us, the lines we draw, the walls we build, the stories we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of connection. We've learned to walk past, to keep our eyes down, to donate from a distance, to volunteer once a year, to care just enough that it doesn't interfere with our comfort. But what if it did? What if real empathy meant being interrupted? Danielle's life changed, not because she gave food, but because she stopped, because she allowed that small trembling voice to pierce her carefully controlled world, because she chose in a split second to respond with humanity instead of fear, presence instead of avoidance. And that choice, that pause, is available to all of us. You don't need to be a millionaire. You don't need a platform or a camera. You just need to notice. Alana wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking to be seen. And that's the question we're left with now. When someone like Alana stands in front of you, whether it's at a restaurant, on a street corner, in a classroom, or in your own community, will you see her? Will you meet her eyes? Will you choose discomfort over indifference? Will you listen? Because the next moment like this may not go viral, it may not make the news, but it might be your moment to change everything, not just for someone else, but for yourself. Because sometimes all it takes is a question and the courage to answer it differently. If you made it this far, if your heart stirred, even for a second, then this story was meant for you. Because stories like Alana's are not fiction. They're happening right now, just out of sight. And how we respond says everything about who we are. So if this message reached you, if it moved you, if it reminded you to look up and see the people around you, subscribe to this channel, because we tell stories that matter, stories that challenge, inspire, and make us better. Leave a comment below and write, "I choose to see." That phrase alone might inspire someone else to open their heart too. And of course, hit the like button, not for numbers, but to help this message find its way to someone who's forgotten that compassion still exists. Finally, don't stop here. Watch the next video on your screen, because one story opens the door for another. Let's keep the conversation and the change alive.